continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Cracks in Paradise. Derek Thompson stood at his kitchen window, watching the morning sun cast long shadows across his manicured lawn. At 38, he possessed the kind of quiet intensity that made people instinctively step aside when he walked through a room. His military bearing, earned through 8 years as a Marine Corps reconnaissance specialist, had never quite left him, even after transitioning into civilian life as a successful construction contractor. The house around him represented everything he'd worked for, a 2-story colonial in Riverside Heights, complete with white picket fence and the promise of the American dream. He'd built this life brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, believing he was creating something permanent for his family. Lauren, his wife of 7 years, had left 2 days ago for what she called a critical business conference in Chicago. Her marketing firm, she'd explained with that practice smile, needed her to secure a major client. Derek had nodded, kissed her goodbye, and promised to take good care of their 5-year-old daughter, Emma. But something felt different this time. Lauren had been distant for months, her phone always face down, her explanations for late nights becoming increasingly elaborate. Derek's instincts, honed by years of reading dangerous situations, whispered that something was wrong. "Daddy," Emma's small voice broke his reverie. She stood in the doorway wearing her favorite purple pajamas, her dark hair tousled from sleep. But there was something in her posture, a hesitancy that struck Derek as unusual. "Morning, princess," Derek said, kneeling to her level. "How about we make pancakes for breakfast?" Emma's eyes widened with something that looked like surprise, then quickly lowered. Am I allowed to have pancakes?" The question hit Derek like a physical blow. Allowed? What 5-year-old asked if they were allowed to eat breakfast? "Of course you are, sweetheart. You can have whatever you want." Emma's lip trembled. "Mommy says I can only eat when I'm good. I've been bad lately." Derek's blood turned to ice. His daughter, his precious little girl, had been conditioned to question her right to food. The implications crashed over him like a tsunami, and for a moment, the careful control he'd maintained over his emotions threatened to shatter. "Emma, honey," Derek said, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "You are always good. Always. And you can always eat. Do you understand me?" She nodded uncertainly, and Derek pulled her into his arms, his mind already racing. If Lauren was denying their daughter food as punishment, what else had been happening in his absence? His job required him to work long hours, often leaving early and returning after Emma's bedtime. He trusted Lauren completely. That trust, he was beginning to realize, might have been the biggest mistake of his life. The next hour passed in a blur of pancakes and gentle questions. Derek learned that Emma had been eating dinner alone in her room most nights, that she'd been told she was too loud and too messy for family meals. She spoke of timeouts that lasted for hours, of being told she was disappointing, of feeling like she had earned basic affection. Each revelation struck Derek like a hammer blow. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd built this life with, had been systematically breaking down their daughter's spirit. And he'd been oblivious, working himself into the ground to provide for a family that was being destroyed from within. As Emma finally relaxed enough to giggle at his silly voices during breakfast, Derek made 2 silent promises. First, he would protect his daughter from any further harm. Second, he would find out exactly what Lauren was hiding. Derek Thompson had never been a man who forgave betrayal. And if his growing suspicions were correct, Lauren was about to discover just how ruthless he could be. Chapter 2. Beneath the Surface. That afternoon, while Emma napped, Derek began his investigation. 20 years of military training and 15 years of running his own business had taught him patience and thoroughness. He started with Lauren's home office, a pristine space that she'd always insisted was off-limits. The locked filing cabinet yielded to his skills within minutes. Inside, he found bank statements for an account he'd never seen before. The deposits were modest, but regular, $500 here, $300 there, and they'd been going on for 8 months. But it was the accompanying receipts that made his hands clench into fists. Hotel bills, Restaurant charges for 2 people. Expensive lingerie purchases from shops Lauren had never mentioned visiting. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from his brother-in-law, Mike. "Hey man, saw Lauren at Rossetti's last night with some guy. Thought she was supposed to be in Chicago. Didn't want to interrupt their date, but figured you should know." The message included a grainy photo taken from across the restaurant. Lauren sat at an intimate corner table, her hand covering that of a man Derek didn't recognize. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m. the previous evening, exactly when she called Derek to complain about her exhausting day of meetings. Derek studied the man's face. Mid-30s, expensive suit, the kind of calculated charm that successful salesmen cultivated. He had the soft look of someone who'd never faced real adversity, never had a fight for anything that mattered. A reverse image search using contacts from his security business yielded results within an hour. Ryan Mitchell, 34, divorced, worked as a senior account manager at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, the same firm that employed Lauren. Derek's investigation deepened. Credit card records showed charges at the Grandview Hotel every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months. Lauren's late work nights suddenly made perfect sense. Phone records revealed hundreds of texts and calls between Lauren and Ryan, often late at night, when Derek was asleep beside her. But the most damning evidence came from Lauren's laptop. Her password, Emma's birthday, gave him access to months of email correspondence that made Derek's jaw clench with barely contained fury. Can't wait until tonight. Derek will be working late again, as usual. Sometimes I think he cares more about his construction projects than his own family. I know, baby. You deserve so much better than some blue-collar grunt who doesn't appreciate you. Emma was being impossible again today. Had to skip her dinner to teach her some respect. Derek spoils her too much when he's around. Derek's hands shook as he read message after message. Lauren wasn't just cheating. She was painting him as a neglectful father and husband to justify her betrayal. Worse, she was taking out her guilt and frustration on Emma, treating their daughter like an inconvenience. The final email thread, dated just last week, made Derek's blood run cold. "Ryan, I've been thinking. Derek's business is doing really well. If something happened to him, an accident on one of his job sites, maybe Emma and I would inherit everything. We could finally be together without all this sneaking around." "Lauren, that's crazy talk. We could just wait for you to file for divorce. And give up half of everything? I've put 7 years into building this life. I'm not walking away with nothing when there are other options." Derek stared at the screen, his wife's words burning into his memory. She wasn't just cheating and abusing their daughter. She was actively fantasizing about his death. The woman he'd trusted with his heart, his home, and his child had been planning to destroy everything he'd built. Derek Thompson had survived firefights in Fallujah, hostile takeovers in the business world, and every challenge life had thrown at him. But he'd never faced betrayal this complete, this personal. The woman sleeping in his bed had been his enemy all along. He closed the laptop and walked to his safe, retrieving the Sig Sauer P226 he'd carried in the Marines. The familiar weight in his hands was oddly comforting. Not for violence, not yet, but as a reminder of who he really was beneath the suburban facade. Derek Thompson was not a man who forgave. And Lauren was about to learn that some enemies were far more dangerous than she could imagine. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. Derek spent the next day meticulously documenting everything. Screenshots of emails, copies of financial records, detailed notes about Emma's revelations. He assembled the evidence with the same precision he'd once used to plan military operations. But documentation was just the beginning. Lauren had betrayed not just him, but their innocent daughter. That was unforgivable. Emma seemed to blossom in her mother's absence. Without Lauren's constant criticism and arbitrary rules, the little girl Derek remembered began to emerge. She ate full meals without asking permission, laughed without looking over her shoulder, and slept peacefully through the night. "Daddy," Emma said over dinner, twirling spaghetti around her fork with 5-year-old determination. "When is Mommy coming home?" Derek studied his daughter's face, searching for any sign of longing or sadness. Instead, he saw apprehension. Emma wasn't missing her mother. She was dreading her return. Soon, princess. But I want you to know something important. Derek set down his fork and gave Emma his full attention. No one, and I mean no one, should ever make you feel bad about eating or playing or being yourself. If anyone ever tells you that you're not allowed to eat, you come tell Daddy immediately, okay? Emma nodded solemnly. Even if Mommy says it, the question broke Derek's heart and solidified his resolve. Especially then. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Derek placed a call to Tony Castellano, an old Marine buddy who now ran a private investigation firm in the city. If Lauren wanted to play games involving his potential death, Derek needed to know exactly what he was dealing with. Derek, you son of a bitch, Tony's gravelly voice came through the phone. Haven't heard from you in years. What's the occasion? I need a favor, Tony. A big one. And I need it done quietly. Talk to me. Derek outlined the situation, the affair, the abuse, the veiled threats. Tony listened without interruption, his breathing growing heavier as the details mounted. Jesus, Derek, this is some serious shit. You sure you don't want to just take this to the cops? The cops would file a report and maybe arrange a custody hearing. I need more than that. Derek's voice carried the cold edge that had once made enemy combatants surrender without a fight. I need to know everything about Ryan Mitchell. His finances, his history, his weaknesses. And I need to know if Lauren's serious about these accidents she's fantasizing about. You're talking about some dark territory here, brother. Lauren crossed that line when she started hurting my daughter. Derek stared out his window at the peaceful suburban street, knowing that the tranquility was about to shatter. I'm not looking to do anything I can't live with, but I'm also not going to let this slide. Tony was quiet for a long moment. Give me 48 hours. I'll have everything you need. Thanks, Tony. I won't forget this. Just be careful, Derek. I know that look in your voice. I've seen what happens when you get that look. Derek hung up and poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, his first drink in 6 months. Lauren would return from her business trip tomorrow evening, full of stories about client meetings and conference sessions. She'd kiss him hello with the same lips that had been on Ryan Mitchell, hug Emma with the same hands that had denied her food. But Derek would be ready. He'd spent his military career learning that the key to victory wasn't superior firepower. It was superior information and the will to act on it. Lauren and Ryan had made their choices. Now Derek would make his. He raised his glass in a silent toast to the darkness outside his window. By the time this was over, Lauren and Ryan would understand that Derek Thompson was not a man who could be betrayed without consequences. The suburbs might have softened his edges, but they hadn't changed his core. And his core was forged in places where mercy was a luxury no one could afford. Chapter 4. Masks and Revelations. Lauren returned from Chicago with a suitcase full of lies and a smile that no longer fooled Derek for a second. She swept into the house like a whirlwind, dispensing air kisses and fabricated stories about client presentations and networking dinners. I miss you both so much, she declared, though Derek noticed she barely glanced at Emma, who had instinctively moved closer to him upon her mother's arrival. How was the conference? Derek asked, his voice perfectly neutral as he helped with her luggage. Exhausting, but productive. The Hartwell account is practically in the bag. Lauren's practiced enthusiasm felt like nails on a chalkboard. I barely had time to eat, let alone see the city. Derek nodded sympathetically, knowing she'd spent Tuesday night at Rossetti's with Ryan and Wednesday at the Grandview Hotel. Well, you're home now. That's what matters. That evening, Derek watched Lauren slip back into her role as suburban mother with chilling ease. She criticized Emma's table manners, imposed an arbitrarily early bedtime, and re-established the atmosphere of walking on eggshells that had become normal in their house. She's gotten spoiled while I was away, Lauren complained as they cleaned up after dinner. I can tell you've been too lenient with her. Derek bit back his first 3 responses, each of which would have ended their marriage on the spot. Instead, he smiled mildly. She seemed fine to me. Maybe she's just adjusting to having you back. Lauren's laugh had a brittle edge. You're too soft, Derek. Emma needs structure, discipline. Children who don't learn boundaries early become problems later. Like denying a 5-year-old food, Derek thought, but kept his expression pleasant. I'm sure you know best. His phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Package delivered. Check your email. Derek excused himself to his home office, where Tony's report waited in his encrypted inbox. The contents made Derek's hands clench with barely controlled rage. Ryan Mitchell wasn't just Lauren's affair partner. He was a predator with a pattern. His divorce had been triggered by his ex-wife's discovery of multiple affairs. Before that, he'd been fired from 2 previous jobs for inappropriate relationships with subordinates. He had gambling debts, a cocaine habit, and a history of manipulating vulnerable women. But the most damning information concerned Lauren herself. Tony's investigation had uncovered a previous marriage Derek had never known about, a brief union at 19 that had ended when her first husband discovered her in bed with his best friend. There were also credit cards in Emma's name, fraudulent insurance claims, and a pattern of financial manipulation that painted Lauren as far more calculating than Derek had ever imagined. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of surveillance footage from the Grandview Hotel. Lauren and Ryan, clearly intoxicated, laughing about something as they stumbled toward the elevator. The timestamp showed it was taken just hours before Lauren had called Derek to say goodnight, claiming she was exhausted from meetings. Derek printed everything, organizing it into a folder that would serve as the foundation for what came next. Lauren thought she was playing a game where only she knew the rules. She was about to discover that Derek had been studying the board all along. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emma stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Daddy? I can't sleep. Mommy said I was too loud at dinner and I might not get breakfast tomorrow." Derek's vision went red for a moment. He knelt down and pulled Emma into his arms. "Princess, you will always get breakfast. Always. Daddy promises. But what if you're at work and Mommy? Then you call Daddy immediately. I'll give you a special phone just for emergencies. Okay?" Emma nodded against his chest, and Derek made another silent promise. Whatever Lauren had planned for him, whatever sick game she wanted to play with Ryan, she would never hurt Emma again. Derek Thompson had spent years learning that the most effective warfare was psychological. By the time he was finished, Lauren and Ryan would beg for the mercy he'd never considered giving them. Chapter 5. The Web Titans. Derek's construction business had taught him that the strongest structures were built with careful planning and attention to every detail. Destroying those same structures required the same methodical approach. You had to know exactly where to apply pressure to bring the whole thing crashing down. Over the next 2 weeks, Derek maintained his facade of suburban normalcy while quietly maneuvering the pieces into position. To Lauren, he appeared to be the same devoted husband he'd always been. She had no idea that every conversation was being recorded, every action documented, every weakness cataloged for future use. Tony's ongoing surveillance revealed the full scope of Lauren and Ryan's relationship. They met twice a week at the Grandview, supplemented by lunch dates and late-night phone calls. More disturbing were the conversations Tony managed to record using sophisticated listening devices. Derek's been different lately. Lauren's voice crackled through Derek's earphones as he listened to the latest surveillance tape. More attentive. "It's actually kind of annoying." "Maybe he suspects something," Ryan replied, his voice thick with bourbon and arrogance. "Derek? Please." The man is completely oblivious. He's so focused on his construction projects that he barely notices what's happening in his own house. Derek's jaw clenched. Lauren was right about one thing. He had been oblivious. But that time was over. "Besides," Lauren continued, "I've been thinking more about our conversation. About the accident." Derek's blood turned to ice. This was the first time they'd returned to the topic since the emails. "Lauren, we talked about this. That's crazy, dangerous territory." "Is it though?" Derek works with heavy machinery every day. Job sites are inherently dangerous. If something happened, Lauren's voice took on a dreamy quality that made Derek's skin crawl. "The life insurance alone is worth $2 million. Plus the business, the house, everything. And Emma." There was a long pause. Emma would be better off without Derek filling her head with his blue-collar values. "We could give her a proper upbringing." Derek stopped the recording, his hands shaking with rage. Lauren wasn't just planning his death. She was planning to raise his daughter with her lover, poisoning Emma's memory of him in the process. That night, Derek made a decision that would have horrified the man he'd been 2 weeks ago. But betrayal had a way of stripping away civilized pretenses, revealing the predator that lurked beneath. Derek had connections from his Marine days, men who transitioned into less conventional careers after their military service. A few carefully placed phone calls put him in touch with Marcus Cole, a former Special Forces operator who now specialized in what he euphemistically called problem solving. They met at a diner 40 miles outside the city, far from anyone who might recognize Derek. Marcus looked like an accountant, medium height, unremarkable features, the kind of man who disappeared in crowds. But Derek could see the coiled violence in his posture, the watchful eyes that missed nothing. "I hear you have a situation," Marcus said without preamble. Derek slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything's on there. Audio, video, financial records. 2 people who've declared war on my family." Marcus pocketed the drive without looking at it. "What kind of resolution are you looking for?" "I want them destroyed. Not killed, destroyed. I want them to lose everything they value, everything they've built. I want them to understand what it feels like to have their lives torn apart by someone they trusted." Marcus studied Derek's face. "That's a tall order. Also expensive. Money isn't an issue." Derek slid an envelope across the table. "Down payment. There's more where that came from. I'll need 2 weeks to study the situation, develop a plan. You sure you want to go down this road? Once we start, there's no going back." Derek thought of Emma asking if she was allowed to eat, of Lauren's cold calculation as she planned his death. "They crossed the line first. I'm just making sure they understand the consequences." Marcus nodded and stood to leave. "You'll hear from me soon." As Derek drove home, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his military days, the calm that came before decisive action. Lauren and Ryan thought they were predators, but they were about to discover they'd been stalking someone far more dangerous than they could imagine. The suburban father facade was about to give way to something much darker, and Derek Thompson was going to enjoy every minute of it. Chapter 6: Point of No Return. The surveillance equipment Derek installed throughout his house was military-grade, invisible to casual inspection, but capable of recording everything that happened in his absence. He needed evidence of Lauren's treatment of Emma, but what he captured was worse than he'd imagined. The footage from the kitchen showed Lauren systematically destroying Emma's self-esteem with surgical precision. A 5-year-old's natural exuberance was met with criticism, punishment, and emotional manipulation that would have impressed a trained interrogator. "You're too loud, Emma. Good children don't make noise. Stop crying. Do you want Daddy to see what a baby you are? Maybe you don't deserve dinner tonight. Maybe you need to think about how to be better." Derek watched his daughter's spirit crumble in real time, saw the moment Emma learned to question her own worth. The rage that built in his chest was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. A cold, calculating fury that demanded not just revenge, but annihilation. Lauren's phone calls with Ryan, recorded through the devices Tony had planted, revealed the full scope of their plans. They'd identified Derek's life insurance policies, researched accident statistics in the construction industry, and even discussed specific scenarios that might appear plausible. Construction sites have the highest rate of accidental deaths among blue-collar professions, Ryan's voice explained with academic detachment. Falls, equipment malfunctions, structural collapses, plenty of options that wouldn't raise suspicions. "When?" Lauren asked, her voice eager. "Soon. I've been researching Derek's current projects. There's a high-rise going up downtown where he's been spending a lot of time. 30-story building, lots of exposed edges, heavy machinery." Derek turned off the recording, his decision crystallized. Lauren and Ryan weren't just cheating, they were actively planning his murder. The gloves were officially off. Marcus Cole's plan arrived via encrypted email 48 hours later. It was comprehensive, brutal, and utterly brilliant. Derek read through it twice, marveling at the thoroughness. Marcus had identified every vulnerability, every pressure point, every way to systematically dismantle their lives. Ryan Mitchell's cocaine addiction would be exposed to his employer through carefully planted evidence. His gambling debts would be called in simultaneously, forcing him into financial ruin. The IRS would receive anonymous tips about unreported income, triggering an audit that would reveal years of tax evasion. His ex-wife would receive evidence of his continued infidelity, giving her ammunition to revisit their divorce settlement. Lauren's destruction would be more personal. The fraudulent credit cards in Emma's name would be reported to authorities. Her previous marriage, hidden from Derek, would be exposed along with the pattern of manipulation and betrayal that defined her relationships. Most devastating of all, her own recorded conversations about Emma's abuse would be submitted to Child Protective Services. But the masterstroke was purely Derek's addition to the plan. Lauren wanted him dead for his life insurance. He would make sure she got exactly what she'd asked for, in a way she'd never expect. That evening, Derek took Emma to his parents' house for an impromptu sleepover. His mother, Margaret, had always doted on her granddaughter, and Derek trusted her completely. "Is everything all right, son?" his father asked as they watched Emma play in the backyard. Tom Thompson had served 2 tours in Vietnam and recognized the look in his son's eyes. "It will be," Derek replied. "But I need Emma somewhere safe for a few days. Can you keep her here without asking questions?" Tom nodded slowly. "Your mother and I would love to have her. Take as long as you need." Derek kissed Emma goodbye, promising he'd see her soon. As he drove away, he felt the last restraints of his civilized self falling away. Lauren and Ryan had declared war on his family. Now, they would learn what happened when you targeted Derek Thompson's child. The suburban father was gone. In his place stood something much more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and all the skills necessary to destroy his enemies completely. Phase 3 was about to begin, and Derek intended to make it unforgettable. Chapter 7. The Trap Springs. Derek's accidental death occurred on a rainy Thursday morning at the Meridian Tower construction site. According to witnesses, he was inspecting the 28th floor when a safety cable snapped, sending him plummeting toward the street below. The fall should have been fatal. Would have been fatal if not for the carefully positioned airbag concealed beneath the construction tarp. Derek hit the bag hard enough to bruise every bone in his body, but Marcus Cole's planning was flawless. The impact looked devastating from above, and Derek's apparent lifeless form disappearing beneath the tarp sold the illusion completely. Within minutes, he was loaded into an ambulance staffed by Marcus's associates and whisked away to a private medical facility. Lauren received the call at work, Ryan Mitchell sitting beside her as they reviewed marketing projections. Derek watched her reaction through the hidden camera he'd installed in her office, saw the shock that quickly transformed into something else. Calculation. "Oh my God," Lauren gasped into the phone, her performance worthy of an Oscar. "Are you sure?" Derek fell. "How far?" The construction foreman's voice was appropriately shaken. 28 stories, Mrs. Thompson. "I'm sorry. There's no way anyone could survive a fall like that." Lauren's hand flew to her mouth, but Derek could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was already thinking about life insurance payouts, about the freedom to be with Ryan without the messy complications of divorce. I need to get to the hospital," she managed, her voice breaking in all the right places. "Ma'am, they've already pronounced him dead at the scene. I'm so sorry for your loss." Derek watched Lauren hang up and turn to Ryan, her mask slipping for just a moment. The smile that crossed her face was triumphant, predatory. She was a woman who'd just won the lottery. "What happened?" Ryan asked, though Derek could tell he already knew. "Derek's dead," Lauren whispered, then louder, "Derek's dead. He fell from the construction site. An accident, just like we discussed." They embraced, and Derek felt his last shred of doubt evaporate. Lauren wasn't grieving. She was celebrating. The woman he'd married, the mother of his child, was actively rejoicing in what she believed was his death. But Derek Thompson was very much alive, and he was just getting started. While Lauren played the grieving widow for her coworkers, Derek was meeting with Marcus Cole to finalize the next phase. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city had been converted into a sophisticated operations center, complete with surveillance equipment, communications gear, and holding facilities. "She's reacting exactly as predicted," Marcus reported, showing Derek footage from multiple hidden cameras. "Already called the insurance company, the bank, and a lawyer. She's not wasting any time claiming her inheritance. Derek studied the screens showing Lauren's activities. She'd left work early, claiming she was too distraught to function, but had immediately driven to Ryan's apartment. The bedroom camera Derek had never wanted to install showed them celebrating in the most intimate way possible. "What about Emma?" Derek asked. "Still safe with your parents?" Lauren hasn't even asked about her yet. That fact hit Derek harder than any of Lauren's other betrayals. Her own daughter's father was supposedly dead, and Lauren hadn't given Emma a second thought. She was too busy planning her new life with Ryan. "Time for phase 2, Derek said, his voice carrying the cold authority that had once commanded Marines in combat. "Bring them both here. Tonight." Marcus nodded. "Already in motion." Lauren thinks she's meeting a life insurance investigator who wants to expedite her claim. Ryan thinks he's meeting a potential client for a lucrative marketing contract. They'll both be here within the hour. Derek checked his equipment one final time. Lauren and Ryan wanted to play deadly games. He was about to teach them the rules. Chapter 8. Truth and Consequences. Lauren arrived first, dressed in widow's black and practicing her grief-stricken expression in the rearview mirror. She never saw the tranquilizer dart that dropped her before she could exit her car, never realized she was being loaded into a van by professionals who'd perfected the art of invisible abduction. Ryan followed 20 minutes later, his BMW gleaming under the warehouse's security lights. He was unconscious before he reached the entrance, his dreams of inheriting Derek's life cut short by chemical efficiency. When they woke up, Lauren and Ryan found themselves in what looked like abandoned office space. Fluorescent lights, concrete floors, and an unmistakable sense of isolation. They were bound to chairs facing each other, close enough to touch but helpless to move. "What the hell?" Ryan groaned, his head swimming from the tranquilizer. Lauren was more alert, her eyes scanning their surroundings with the calculating intelligence Derek had once found attractive. "We've been kidnapped," she said, her voice steady despite their circumstances. "Very good, Lauren." Derek's voice came from speakers hidden throughout the room, electronically disguised, but carrying an authority that made both prisoners flinch. "Though kidnapped isn't quite accurate. You're here for a performance review." "Who are you?" Lauren demanded. "What do you want?" "I want to discuss your recent activities. Specifically, your celebration of your husband's untimely death." Derek watched their faces through hidden cameras, saw the moment comprehension dawned. Lauren's eyes widened with something approaching panic, while Ryan looked confused and terrified. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lauren said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? Let me refresh your memory." Derek activated the video screens mounted around the room. Lauren and Ryan watched themselves celebrating Derek's death, saw their intimate moments replayed in high definition. They witnessed their own conversations about murder, insurance money, and their plans for Derek's daughter. "Jesus Christ," Ryan whispered. "How long have you been watching us?" "Long enough to understand exactly who you are," Derek replied. "Lauren Thompson, unfaithful wife, child abuser, and would-be murderer. Ryan Mitchell, predator, manipulator, and accessory to planned homicide. Did I miss anything?" Lauren's mask finally slipped completely. "Derek's dead. I watched him fall. Whoever you are, whatever you want, you're too late for revenge." Derek stepped into the light, no longer bothering to disguise his voice. "Hello, Lauren." The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a scream. Ryan stared in shock, his mind struggling to process the impossibility of Derek's presence. "Surprised?" Derek asked mildly. "I have to admit I was surprised too. Surprised by how quickly you moved on from my death. Surprised by how little you cared about Emma's well-being. Most of all, surprised by how thoroughly you planned my murder." "Derek, I can explain," Lauren began. "No explanations necessary. I heard everything, saw everything. The affair, the abuse, the planning. You wanted me dead for my insurance money. You wanted to raise my daughter with your lover. You wanted to erase me from Emma's life." Derek circled their chairs slowly, letting the weight of discovery settle over them. "So I decided to give you exactly what you wanted. Derek Thompson, the trusting husband and father, is dead. What you're looking at now is something else entirely." Ryan found his voice. "Look, man, I know how this looks, but Derek's backhand sent Ryan's chair toppling backward, his head cracking against the concrete floor. When Derek hauled him upright, blood trickled from Ryan's split lip. "The time for explanations is over," Derek said calmly. "Now comes the education portion of our program." Lauren was crying now, her careful composure shattered. "Derek, please. Think about Emma. She needs her mother." "Emma needs protection from her mother," Derek corrected. "Which brings us to your first lesson. Actions have consequences, Lauren, and your consequences are just beginning." Derek activated another screen, showing Lauren's recorded conversations about denying Emma food, about her plans to reshape his daughter's memory of him. Her face went white as she realized the scope of Derek's knowledge. "You see, I spent the last month learning things. About both of you. Your histories, your weaknesses, your fears. And I've developed a comprehensive plan to address each one." Derek pulled out a tablet and began reading. "Ryan, your employer received an anonymous tip about your cocaine use yesterday. The drug test results should be interesting. Your bookie also received payment in full for your gambling debts, along with photographs of you with other men's wives. Gambling addicts with a reputation for infidelity don't last long in that world." Ryan's face went ashen. "You son of a bitch." "And Lauren, Child Protective Services received quite an education about your parenting methods, along with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, who were fascinated by the credit cards you opened in Emma's name." Derek leaned back against the wall, studying their faces. "But those are just the appetizers. The main course is what happens next." The warehouse fell silent except for Lauren's sobbing and Ryan's labored breathing. Derek Thompson had returned from the dead, and he was just getting started. Chapter 9. Final Justice. The final phase of Derek's revenge unfolded over 3 days of systematic psychological destruction. Lauren and Ryan discovered that their comfortable world had been built on foundations far more fragile than they'd realized. Ryan lost everything first. His employer fired him within hours of receiving evidence of his drug use and workplace affairs. His gambling debts, now public knowledge, made him unemployable in his field. The IRS audit revealed years of unreported income, triggering criminal charges that would ensure his financial ruin. By day 2, Ryan Mitchell had transformed from confident predator to broken shell. Lauren's destruction was more personal, more complete. The evidence of child abuse was ironclad. Hours of surveillance footage showing her systematic emotional torture of Emma. Child Protective Services removed Emma from her custody immediately, though Derek's parents were granted temporary guardianship while his estate was settled. "You're insane," Lauren whispered on the second night, her voice hoarse from crying. "The courts will never believe Emma is better off without her mother." Derek played another recording, Lauren's own voice describing Emma as an inconvenience, discussing how her daughter would be better off without Derek's influence. The courts are very interested in mothers who view their children as obstacles to their sex lives. By the third day, Lauren faced criminal charges for child abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The life insurance money she'd counted on was frozen pending the investigation into Derek's death. Her job was gone, her reputation destroyed, her future a series of legal battles she couldn't afford to fight. Ryan tried a bargain. "Look, we can make a deal. I'll disappear, never contact Lauren again. Just let me go." Derek studied the broken man who'd helped plan his murder. "You wanted to inherit my life, Ryan. You wanted to sleep in my bed, spend my money, raise my daughter. How does it feel to have nothing instead?" "Please," Ryan begged. "I'll do anything." "You'll do exactly what I tell you to do," Derek replied. "You're going to confess to everything. The affair, the planning, the abuse. You're going to make sure Lauren gets exactly what she deserves." Derek produced a document, a full confession detailing their plans to murder him and claim his inheritance. "Sign it, and I'll make sure your prison sentence is federal instead of state. Better facilities, better food. Refuse, and I'll make sure your fellow inmates know exactly what kind of man you are." Ryan signed without reading it, his hand shaking as he sealed his fate. Lauren was harder to break, her survival instincts fighting even when the situation was hopeless. "Emma will never forgive you for this. When she grows up, she'll realize you destroyed her mother." Derek activated one final video, Lauren denying Emma dinner, telling their daughter she was too loud and too bad to deserve food. Emma's small voice asking if she was allowed to eat echoed through the warehouse. Emma will grow up knowing her father protected her from a mother who saw her as an inconvenience, Derek said quietly. She'll understand that some people don't deserve forgiveness. Lauren signed her confession through tears, admitting to child abuse, adultery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Her signature was barely legible, but legally binding. Derek reviewed both documents, then activated the warehouse's sprinkler system. Lauren and Ryan watched in horror as water cascaded from the ceiling, their confessions dissolving into illegible pulp. Unfortunately, Derek said with mock sadness, your confessions have been damaged. I suppose you'll have to give them again to the authorities. In person, with lawyers present, Derek untied their restraints and stepped back. You're free to go. The authorities are waiting outside to take your statements. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your story. As Lauren and Ryan stumbled toward the door, Derek called after them. One more thing. If either of you ever contact Emma, if you ever try to be part of her life in any way, you'll discover that my tolerance for mercy has been permanently exhausted. Are we understood? They nodded frantically and fled into the night, where FBI agents were indeed waiting to take them into custody. Derek watched from the shadows as the woman who betrayed his trust and abused his daughter was loaded into a federal vehicle. Lauren Thompson had wanted to be a widow, so she could start fresh with her lover. Now she would be a convict instead, and Ryan would be nothing but a memory. 2 weeks later, Derek Thompson officially survived his construction accident through a miraculous series of events that kept the insurance investigators busy but satisfied. His recovery was deemed nothing short of miraculous, though he would require extensive physical therapy. Emma ran into his arms when he returned home, her joy undiminished by her mother's absence. Daddy, you're okay. Grandma said you got hurt, but you were going to be fine. I'm better than fine, princess, Derek said, holding his daughter close. And I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again. Lauren received a 15-year sentence for child abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Ryan got 12 years as a cooperating witness. Both would be eligible for parole eventually, but Derek had made it clear that their release would simply mark the beginning of a new phase of his attention. Derek Thompson had learned that some betrayals were too complete to forgive, some enemies too dangerous to show mercy. He'd protected his daughter, destroyed his enemies, and secured their future. The suburban facade was gone, replaced by something harder and more honest. In the end, Lauren had been right about one thing. Derek Thompson had died in that fall. What emerged from the ruins was something his enemies would never forget, and something his daughter would always be able to count on. Some men were built to forgive. Derek Thompson was built to protect what mattered, no matter the cost. And Emma would never have to ask if she was allowed to eat again. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.